Hello and welcome to a PHP Basics tutorial on form handling. In this tutorial I will be covering the basics of handling a form in PHP as well as how to code a form in HTML. So let's get started. First things first, I'm just going to open and close some HTML tags. I'm going to ignore my doc types for today, even though that's bad practice. Okay, so within your HTML, you can have open and close form. So that's just form in greater than, less than symbols, and then the regular closing, which is just a / after form. So within these tags, there are two main attributes that we are going to assign it. The first one being method, and the second one being action. So in method, there are two things you can be. It can be a post, or it can be get. I will be discussing the difference between these when I get to the PHP part of this tutorial. Action is the page which the form will submit to. So for instance, I could submit it to submitted data thingy.php, but I don't have that file, so I'm going to submit it to form_handling.php, which is the current file I'm working in, as you can see up here. But since it's the current file, I actually don't need to type in the file name. I can just enter a blank string, and that will submit to this page. Now, those are the two main attributes. It can take more, such as name, ID, that sort of thing, but we're only going to be using these two. Now, there are a number of elements within the form, the main one being input. An input self-ends, so instead of having an input opening and input closing tag, you have input, and then instead of just closing it off normally, you have closing it off using a / and then the closing tag. This has a number of elements too. This time we're going to define name, type, and just name and type for this one. So in name, just like in all other HTML elements that have the name attribute, it's just an identifier for the specific name. So this one we're just going to name it text, and the name is very important once it comes to the PHP part of this tutorial. The type, there's a number of types, and if you've seen a video where they've used input before, then you would probably have seen input type text, or input type password, or input type radio. There's a number of them. I will link in the description to a page that talks about all the different input types. I may make a video on it later, but for this one, since it's mainly about PHP form handling, I'm going to set it to text. What this means is that we're going to have within our form an input that you can enter text data into. So if we refresh this page, you can see that we have a little box right here, and I can type into it. And this displays as regular text data. If I were to change this to password, and we refresh this page, it's still a text box, but when I type into it, it's starred out. And so that's the difference, but we're going to change that back to text and save. Now we're going to put in another input type. The type is going to be submit. The name will also be submit. And we're also going to assign this one a value. Now value is another attribute of the input tag. What this does is it assigns a predetermined value to the object that the page submits. So here I'm going to assign it the value of submit ! Now I'm going to go back to here, refresh. First thing you'll notice we have the submit button. The submit, which is the value, has appeared on it. So that's the first noticeable place where value appears. But if I type something in here and click submit, if you look up here in the URL, I'm going to copy this and bring it into my notepad down here. can ignore up to here. So we have, this is our page name, formhandling.php. We have a question mark. We have text, which, as you can see, is the name of the first input field, equals hey. Hey is what I typed into the text box. We then have an ampersand, which is the and symbol. Submit, which is the name of the submit, is equal to submit, which is the value I gave it. So as you can see, since we are using get, in the URL, each of the input type names is assigned the value that we give it. If you were to assign this an automated value, is equal to, and let's delete that and save. We'll refresh this now. You can see that text comes up here. If we submit, text is now in place of where hey is. If we change this to hey, we'll submit. Hey is now up there, but since the value is text, text goes back in the box. So that's the very basics of creating your HTML form, and I'm just going to remove the value here. Really, all you will ever need are your form and your inputs. They do get more complicated than that, but I'm leaving it at that for this tutorial. Now I'm going to start on the PHP. So we're going to open and close our PHP tags here. And as you remember, I mentioned this method right here. This method is the way which the server deals with the information that's being submitted. So the get variable, or the get method, as you can see, inserts it into the URL. The other method, post, if we just go back here, delete that, refresh, we now submit, you see it does not go into the URL, but the page has still submitted it. So that's the main visible difference, is that get submits to the URL, post does not. The other difference is based on the limitations of what you can submit. Post allows you to submit much more data than get does, and it's more powerful. Get has more restrictions on it and submits through the URL. If you want to know more information on this, you can check out documents online that describe in detail, but basically that is the difference. When dealing with it in PHP, it is assigned into what is generally referred to as a get or a post variable that is accessed using the dollar sign, underscore, and then post or get, respectively, depending on what your method is. Now and then it opens up square brackets, similar to how an array works. Within these square brackets, you open up quotes and you have the name of whatever fields you want to use. So for instance, if we want to access the text field, we would have dollar underscore post text. So let's just echo this out, and then refresh this page, and we'll resend the data, and you see we get hey. If we type in bye and submit, we echo out bye. Now if we were to change this method to get and this to get, and we'll now refresh the page. We won't resend the data, so we'll refresh it that way. We get undefined index, don't worry about that error right now. We're just going to send hey again. You can see that we echo out hey in the same way that we did before, but hey is also up here. So it's the basics of how you access these variables. And the basics of the difference between get and post. Let's change this back to post, and let's change this back to post. So, generally speaking, a form will be used so that the user can input data. So let's just say that we wanted to allow the user to enter their name. So we're gonna do a couple. I'm just gonna make this little code here to show you. First thing that we want to do is we want to check to see if the submit has been pressed. And the reason we do this is to avoid that error that we saw before where it said undefined index, because that was saying that the form has not been submit, basically. And so we want to avoid that error. So we're going to say if is set $post submit. If this is set, we want to do what's in this brackets. If it's not set, then we're going to do whatever. But so if it's set, we are going to say echo hello, and then underscore post text. So basically, we're going to get the user to enter their name in the text field, and if the text has been submitted, we're going to say hello to them. If it has not been, we will not say hello to them. So we're going to refresh this page. You can see that we don't get any errors, even though we are still echoing out that variable. Then I'm going to type in my name. My name's Dylan. So we'll go to click submit, and you get hello Dylan. It's a very basic use for the form, but it's to illustrate that, or the use of them. So just to quickly recap on what we've learned. So a form takes the main two attributes of method and action. Action is the page it submits to. Method is post or get, depending on how you want to send the data. The main inputs are, or the main elements are the input elements, and these take your name, which is the PHP identifier within the get and post variables. It's the identifying key. Then you can also have your type, which we've used submit and text. There are a number of different types, again linked to a guide for that in the description. And value, if you want it to have predetermined value. If not, the value is assigned based on what the user inputs. Then within PHP, it is called using the underscore or $_ and then get or post, depending on the method you're using, and then in square brackets and quotes the identifying key that you have, and that is where the value will be stored, assuming the value has been set by the page already. That is about it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something. Please feel free to ask me questions in the comment section below. I will do my best to answer them or find the answers for you. Please check out my other videos on my channel, and comment, rate, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.